Welcome to Planetary Health First, Mars Next. It is going to be an amazing journey today. Hope you are ready for liftoff. We are live now. Well, I am Michael Mann, the host of Planetary Health First, Mars Next. Thank you for joining us. We are live today, and usually our shows are always going to be upbeat and we do have really great topics. Today is a little different of a topic, but so important, and it's relevant, time sensitive. So we really felt the need to get it out here, especially because it was a guest we already had batched in to talk, and there's no better person to talk that I know of, a friend, than on this subject and the topic. No, your Jewish friends are not okay. And this is Gil Bashe, my dearest good friend. And Gil, can you give us a little bit of your background of why you would be one of my best friends to talk about this situation that's going on?
Well, Michael, first of all, thank you so much for reaching out and having me on the program. You're really a superb host, and you bring the best out in your guests. And so I think the program is very successful in large part due to you. So thank you. And I'm truly honored to be among that cadre of close friends of Michael Mann. It's an honor. Just to plug about you for a second before we dive into a weighty topic. I think that those of you who are very involved in the health field should know that Michael has really been a champion in looking at the fragmented health ecosystem and how he can piece it together. He's an expert in the field. So in a way, there's no better person to moderate a program like this than Michael. A bit about my background. It's very eclectic. First of all, I'm honored to be the chair of Global Health and Purpose at Fin Partners, an organization that was created on purpose, for purpose, and for social impact. So, I think that speaks volumes about Fin and the community, a community that actually dedicates its tremendous amount of its energy to make a difference. And so that community gives me really the opportunity to express how I feel on important evolving political issues, like as Michael has reached out, the pressing topic of what's happening right now in Israel and the Middle East. I don't need to recount what's going on right now. Almost everybody who'll be listening to this program has known of the horrific events of the past few days. The tragedies continue to unfold. About 1,400 Israeli citizens murdered, shot, burnt. I won't go into the graphic details. It's men, babies, and of course women. Some tourists, about 260 people killed who were attending the what's called the Nova Music Festival for Peace in the desert. The Hamas terrorists came upon them and shot and killed them randomly. It's just mind-boggling what has occurred over the last few days. And my own background actually is the complexity of all this. I'm born in the States, but I'm an American Israeli. I served for about 6 or 7 years, I forget, in the Israeli Defense Forces as a paratrooper and combat medic. I'm ordained as a Orthodox traditional rabbi. And I own a home in Israel, an apartment in Israel, in central Israel, right outside of Tel Aviv. So this is a very emotionally wrenching topic for me. And when people say to me, how are you doing or how are you feeling? I sometimes don't really know how to answer the question, Michael. It's so complex for members of the Jewish community around the world and for many different reasons. And I can touch on that because I think the 15 million Jews around the world are going through I would say, a communal experience of PTSD. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to leave our listeners on a moment of despair. Mm-hmm. I would say from the millennia of suffering we have faced for all different reasons and by all different evil hands, we are a community of hope. Mm-hmm. And even Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, is translates into the hope. So that's a unique spark within the community that I think at this particular moment is keeping us going a step at a time. We're a hopeful people. We're not a hateful people. And I think it's important to really talk about the differences between the mindsets of hope and hate right now, for people. And I would just say, on one hand, you'll see Israeli soldiers who've been called up to defend the southern border and prepare to protect the northern border. You'll see them gathering, and then all of a sudden someone will break out into song. They'll bring out a guitar, they'll start singing, they'll even start dancing, really on the heels of such great national despair, or communities. They're singing and they're dancing, and you say to yourself, how can they possibly sing and dance communally, hopefully, at this time? And it's exactly because of that. It's exactly because they're hopeful that their efforts, their actions will lead to peace, and not just peace for the people of Israel, believe it or not, potentially, as strange as this might sound, peace for the Palestinian people on the Gaza Strip, who are really being held captive. I don't think the world really realizes that to the fullest extent. They're being held captive by an ISIS-like potentate that calls all the shots and is using them horribly as human shields. They knew that their action would require a response. They knew that. They're not dumb. They're willing to sacrifice all their people in order to kill other people. That's unconscionable. So let me stop here and just say, we're going to explore a little bit about the mental health, I know, of the Jewish community. And it's timely because just this week was World Mental Health Day. And here we're talking about really the mental health of one of the world's oldest communities, the Jewish community. Let me stop and return, let you have the mic back for a bit.
Yeah, no, I'm only as good as the people on the other side, and that's you talking. So, but I really thank you for kind of giving us a backdrop, and I really thank you in the green room, if there is such a green room on these little StreamYard networks or whatever we use. But to say yes to this topic, I know it's really, I don't even begin to know, other than me just being a human, just really being very upset with what I'm seeing and what I felt. Why I wanted to see if you were okay with sharing is just, I still think there's so much divisiveness and lack of clarity out there in the other medias that I'm seeing with different. And I don't want to get into all the details because I'm just the person that I want to allow you to hopefully bring some clarity, a better voice for others to understand. I think we need more understanding. We can't have peace unless we have understanding.
Michael, to your point, after the tragedy of the Yom Kippur War, and a lot of people, this assault on the people of Israel occurred almost to the day of the outbreak of the Yom Kippur War, and it's being cited by Israel as Israel being surprised yet again by a horrible foe, as it was during the Yom Kippur War. I do want to address that to give people some encouragement. The horrible error, military, snafu here, horrible, it comes from a good place in a very strange way. The government of Israel actually believed, based on Hamas's actions, that maybe they were going to shift into nation building. The Hamas regime gets billions of dollars each year from countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and actually the United Nations, refugee billions. And yet, where have those billions gone? They haven't gone to rebuild the water lines or the electrical plant or build new hospital systems or anything else for the public good. They're on the Mediterranean coast, my friend. You would say, gee, why don't we have peace or have Cold War and get Hilton and Marriott and all these chains to build casinos up and down the Mediterranean coast? Then all our people would be employed in those casinos, and people would be coming in and spending good money here with us. None of that has occurred since since essentially Hamas gained control of the Gaza Strip in 2007. None of it. So the world doesn't really focus on historical events. They focus on what they want to focus on, and actually that's adding to the Jewish community's pain. When people from and I consider myself a lifelong progressive, but when people from the progressive community all of a sudden complain about Israel shutting off the electricity and water supply to Gaza, and they don't mention that it's a bargaining chip. Give us back our hostages and we'll turn it on. You could have it on tomorrow, today, whatever you want. Just give us back our people. They cite the lack of water, electricity, but they're absent. I won't mention actually one leading progressive who's been tweeting out consistently her point of view from the New York metro area. She's been tweeting out her point of view, and it's painful. It's just painful for those of us who are progressive Americans who seek peace to see that one-sided point of view. Nobody really wants to study in depth the history because it's complex. And as people, we don't like complexity. We don't like complexity. But I want to reflect on what people in the Jewish community are going on. As you know, Friday the 13th has been declared by the head of Hamas as a day of jihad. And he has said, if you have an axe or a knife or a gun, Jews are open territory all around the world. How can the world just sit by and in a way say that's terrible, but shrug its shoulders? It's a world problem. And as we've seen with ISIS and the Taliban, these people, extremists, don't stop with one community. They really think of themselves as ruling the world in a singular fashion. So I just say to all of our listeners, it's not, we're horribly distraught and pained by this, emotionally, physically, but it's everybody's problem to stop injustice in the world of this level. I will say on my background, which is kind of a composite of Jewish history, I was raised emotionally by my grandmother, who was dragged out to the forest with her family, one of 8 children, parents, dragged out to the forest. Her parents and pretty much all of her siblings were killed in front of her. She was left in the heap of bodies. They thought she was dead. Thank God for me. Obviously, I'm here today because of her stamina and courage. She crawled out, rescued 2 other smaller siblings who the family had hid, just like parents on the southern border of Israel. They hid their children under the house. There are cases of children in the villages near the Gaza Strip in Israel who the parents were killed protecting their children. They locked their children in a safe room, tried to fend off the terrorists. And in one case, 2 10-month-old infants were rescued 6 hours later by Israeli forces, but the parents were found dead. So my grandmother rescued her 2 little siblings who were much younger than she was. And relatives here in the United States heard of their plight and brought them here. She was a 17-year-old now with 2 little kids. And then soon afterward began a family of her own. So I was raised by a woman who had a scar in the middle of her forehead from what's called a pogrom. And that scar became implanted on my body emotionally as well. When you live through that, then because of the Holocaust, most of my family was destroyed, was murdered in Auschwitz in January 1943. So I have the wave of the pogroms in my history. I have the wave of entire segments of my family being annihilated, murdered in World War II. And I also have a segment of my family who moved to Israel. I'm a proud first cousin of Israel's first president, Chaim Weizmann, who really sought peace. If you read anything about him, he really sought peace with our Palestinian neighbors who are actually cousins, genetic cousins. And he also created, of course, the famous Weizmann Institute for science. So maybe my passion for health innovation comes a little bit from my family line. I was drawn to Israel and moved there as a young person. I served in the Israeli Defense Forces. I served in a paratrooper unit. I served in Lebanon. I did 6 tours in Lebanon, actually. And I have also been quoted as someone who ran out as a combat medic under fire to rescue wounded Syrian soldiers who had been left behind by their comrades. And that's really part of the genome of the Israeli Defense Forces. It's a concept called purity of arms, which means when someone's no longer a combatant, you have an obligation to protect and sustain them. And we certainly lived up to that obligation. I also had the privilege of, as a combat medic with others, including our unit doctor, opening up an aid station for civilian children and families in areas where we had been under fire only hours before. We immediately provided sustenance, food, water, power, and medical care to the civilian population. So I come from that background. My family and I, we own an apartment in central Israel. We go there often. We have friends and family there, and they're living through this horror right now. And we're also living through this horror differently, because all Jews, whether they've been to Israel or not, have a sense of connection to the land of Israel. It's part of our religious history. It's part of our history. And so we all feel some sense of torment over what's happening right now. So when you say to your Jewish friends, are you okay? In many cases, the answer is no, I'm not. We're feeling historic PTSD. We're feeling forms of depression. We're feeling forms of helplessness. What can we do? In my case, it's compounded because I was once a soldier, obviously a little too old now to do that. So, but I remember being called up to defend the country by phone, or someone would knock on my door during the pre-smartphone days, of course. And now, I kind of look at my phone and I just say, I'm not able to do that. I am able to speak about the experience of how different people feel. I am able to provide support. I will be going over to work with my colleagues. Finn has a very vibrant office. We're the leading supporter of both health tech and climate tech in that market, representing companies there to the United States. So I will be there as soon as I can go to support them and our clients to express my support and roll up my sleeves and do some work. I'm also going to be speaking at the mHealth Israel conference as a keynote on December 4th. So my commitment, the conference is going on as a sign of commitment. So my plan is to be there. How do people there feel? It ranges. It ranges. Some people are just, vigorously, anger doesn't describe it. Rage. They feel rage. Some people feel despondent. When will this horror of attacks end? And what can the government and army do to protect us? They feel vulnerable. Some people are very worried their children have been called up and are fighting. Every day I see on my Facebook scroll, I mentioned to someone, my Facebook scroll has become sort of the revolving wall of the dead. Babies' pictures, families' pictures, young men and women who serve in the Israeli Defense Forces killed. Some heroically remained in these villages. Maybe 5 or 6 soldiers saw hundreds of Hamas warriors, terrorists heading toward them, and chose to stay and fight to the last bullet. Cases of people who are not soldiers, who are in the emergency medical unit, rushed into the villages to try to save as many people as they could, and died in the attempt. So there's a lot of horror, there's a lot of disbelief, there's a lot of rage, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of hope. And certainly many Jews here in our industry, in the health industry, throughout, we feel those same feelings.
Mm.
So on any given day, I can feel ire, anger. I can feel frustration. I can feel frustration. I feel mostly upset, believe it or not, by organizations that want to say something, but instead of just saying, like, directing it right now toward the Jewish people and Israel about this massacre. The Jewish community has not experienced a massacre of this level since the Holocaust. And instead of just focusing on that, they offer a half-hearted statement of support. Say, this is bad. And also we feel bad about what the Palestinians are going through right now. It is bad, by the way, but I would highly recommend they divide that, because by trying to be politically correct, they just make everybody pissed off, right? Yeah. We feel devalued and dismissed, and they feel like, in many cases, why are we lumped in with the Jews? Because of their sort of sense of where they're coming from. I think those organizations would basically say, we yearn for peace among people, and what happened to the Jewish community of Israel is unacceptable. It's a little bit like, Michael, you're expert at this, and many are trained. I do something to you to offend you, and you say, that really hurt my feelings, and I say, Michael, I'm sorry I did that, but I did it because you did such and such and such and such. It's called that, like a half-hearted apology, or a slap across the face, right? Like a slap across the face while you're apologizing. And I think that a lot of the Jewish community is getting very upset now at everybody wanting to say something, and they're really not addressing the core issue. People were murdered.
Well, to me, I mean, forgive me for being wrong. I'm going to just put it out there, but it's terrorists. There's not a reference point of any bit of humanity of the operation of what has happened. And it's just evil. I hate to say it. I don't, that's I can't understand anymore. And I'm just here on the show so I can at least have you fill in my nonsense. But I'm glad I haven't posted anything or done any of these things where it's from someone like myself who doesn't understand the depth and breadth like you have, because you are from everything you've shared, from your family, from the Holocaust, and all of what you shared with, and everything from you. And so I'm just so feeling very grateful that it's a timely occurrence that you were going to be here before this even happened, so I could have your voice captured to at least do something,
Michael, I want to, because of my own point of view, not many people will not agree with me. It's a very personal point of view, but it is impossible to say a people are bad. Any people, all the people are bad. The people who did this, Hamas, are ISIS-like terrorists, right? They're ISIS-like, Daesh, as some people say. They're ISIS-like terrorists. There's no doubt about that. They, I guess I should be graphics or listen. They burnt babies. They burnt babies. They burnt whole families alive. They posted the videos gleefully on social media. In many cases,
on the family's posts, right? On the families.
Correct.
I mean,
that's correct. They took their smartphones, they opened them up to their Facebook, and then live they posted video of them killing the family. And so their families are left with that as the final memory. So it's a little bit like needing to watch a horrific car accident again and again. It creates a trauma that doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. But I don't want to, from my own point of view, Palestinians are not terrorists. They're people, right? They're people. And they're, in some cases, a tormented people. Tormented because, if you've noticed on their leadership, and this is obvious, no Nelson Mandela has come forward for them to lead them forward. No Gandhi has come forward. No Ben Gurion has come forward. No George Washington has come forward. The challenge is that billions are directed to their needs and never reach them. That's one problem. And then instead of trying to create institutions and a state, um, nothing happens. So the Palestinians are a people. Again, I don't want to speak for all of them, but they're angry and enraged. They're angry and enraged because there's no movement for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're trapped, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not trapped in those countries. They're not trapped in their territory. Keep in mind, the people of Gaza were never trapped by Israel. The southern border is controlled by Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's an Arab country, and not another
Mm-hmm.
Egyptians, not Arabs, but it's controlled by Egypt. The West Bank shares a border with Jordan, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not like they can't get out of those places. And Israel doesn't monitor the Jordanian border with them. That's monitored by the Jordanians, and same with Egypt. So what's the issue here? I'm uncomfortable to say it, but I sometimes think that media simplifies a complex issue because it's good for readership, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's good for readership. It's attractive, and so what we're left with is a sense that who's responsible for the problem? The people who are the victims, the Israelis, right? Almost 1,400 Israeli citizens murdered in their homes, and they're blamed by some political leaders of our country and other countries for having been the catalyst for this nightmare, this horror. And that also contributes back to the mental health impact on the Jewish community. So as I said earlier, when you say, how are you doing? No, I say I'm a very strong person. I'm an action person. I would say I walk around in a haze. And how I clear the haze is I'm hopeful, as is the national anthem of Israel, the Hope. I'm hopeful. I believe peace is possible, just like Sadat, after the Yom Kippur War, came to Jerusalem, flew to Israel, and asked to speak to the Knesset and said he wanted peace with Israel. He wanted peace with conditions, but he wanted a true peace. And that peace has endured for decades. Who is going to be the Palestinian Sadat? Who is going to be the Palestinian Sadat? Their situation will never change until a righteous, thoughtful, dynamic leader steps forward and takes the wheel. And I can say, knowing the sentiment in Israel as I do, when that day happens, he will have or she will have a pretty much a standing ovation from the other side of the border, the same border that Hamas crossed and murdered innocent people.
And so with 1,000, the exact number with your population, my gosh,
it would be the equivalent of, because it's a small country of about 9 million people. So if you wanted to per capita it like the United States, I think it's the equivalent of Israel. If it happened here in the United States, it would be the equivalent of 90,000 people being murdered. So that would be the equivalent of 10 World Trade Center catastrophes happening in the course of a day. And try to imagine the national anguish that would be in this nation. Well, try to imagine the national anguish that occurred on 9/11. Now multiply that. Almost everybody in that country knows someone, a friend who's lost a relative, a relative has been lost. My wife received a call earlier today. Members of the community that we lived in for many years were calling us. One of her neighbor's sons died. A 24-year-old died in combat yesterday. I will say I grew up in a family of grief, as I mentioned, because of what happened to us. But my family also has incredibly loyal, patriotic Americans. My father served in the war, was in the Korean War. His brother, who I'm named after, was a Marine and died in Korea. So the halo of despair should have really been constantly over our heads in our household. My grandmother lost her whole family. Then she lost all of her extended family in the Holocaust. And then one of her 3 sons gives his life for the United States in Korea. And I once used the word, I said, I hate something. And she looked at me. Of course, kids then didn't use the other 4-letter words, right? But she looked at me, and she was never stern or snappy with me. She's a very loving person. She said, "Don't ever use that word. That's a terrible word.
Mm.
Don't hate things."
Mm.
And so that speaks to the essence of the Jewish genome. Despite all this despair, we're hopeful. And that's why Israeli soldiers, as they assemble for the task ahead to really overcome and squash terrorists who really are a danger to the world. They're a danger to the world. They join in song, hopeful song,
Mm-hmm.
because they believe that their mission is to defend the people in the country. It's not called the Israeli army. It's called the Israeli Defense Force. Its sole mission is to defend the people. It's not an offensive force.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gives us a sense of pride.
Yeah.
I'm worried about these young people. I've been to war. I know what's involved. It is it's not like a movie. It's horrific.
Yeah.
And I just have to hope that that they're able to do that with as little loss of life as possible for all, but to get the job done most.
And how many hostages are they right now?
They're
Is there?
estimating 140 hostages.
Okay.
Um,
Wow.
we don't know. There's been videos of some as they were taken across into Gaza. There's been some pictures of children being tormented by their captors. There's a horrific video of an 8-year-old who's separated from his parents, and he's being sort of like tormented by children, other children, and an adult. And and I'm captivated by that video. His face looks so angelic, and he must be so terrified. And that also impacts us all. Again, back to the mental health issue. It's impossible. It's impossible, Michael, not to think about these challenges and these images and have them sort of implanted or burnt into our minds. It will take decades, if ever, to get those out of our heads. Just the generation that lived on the shadow of the Holocaust, constantly lived in the shadow of the Holocaust. I think that this Jewish generation will live in the shadow of this really horrible massacre.
So, are you, as a rabbi, is your community? Are you going to the temples? Are you? I mean, in this time as a group.
There's been a number of special gatherings. What's so unique about this moment, usually, we're from a faith-based standpoint, much like Christianity, we have denominations. Orthodox and conservative, Reform, Renewal, and really, what is touching at this time is those denominations have evaporated, and the communities have come together, often as one, to share their pain and to commiserate and their hope and to mobilize for action. And obviously, people are being directed to do different things. Conversations like this, I think, are very important, that people know that our voices will be heard. And I want to thank you for making time for this special conversation. It means a tremendous amount to me, and I know to large segments of your listeners will be very grateful to you always.
Well, I thank you. I'm still trying to, I can't even grasp. I'm yet to process this. I mean, it's unfathomable, unconscious. unbelievable, and just the level of just depravity and just lack of for humanity. And I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that. And it just is anyway.
I think you've said it all, Michael. I think in your wrap up statement, I think you nailed it. I don't think we'll be able to comprehend why such evil exists, why it's allowed to act, and yet I think we have to remember we're never helpless. We're filled with hope. We're filled with hope, and that hope burns within us and gives us the ability to press on, to not wallow in depression, to not wallow in despair, and to try to manage through our PTSD.
Well, I love that you've really several times throughout this conversation really shared about the community, about the hope, the resiliency. Then you've also put it onto a higher, bigger topic with mental health in general. PTSD is a topic of discussion, which just about all vets, I hate to say it, you've said war, from you as a paratrooper, as a medic, war is not pretty. There's nothing, whether it's anyone who's at war, that this strain of just a killing of death of a life. Yep. So is there anything, as we're kind of wrapping it up, I would love for you to share something, takeaway. This is for you today and your community and your fellow Israelis, for your Jewish friends and all your people.
Yeah. So, I want to give you a two-part answer if I can. First, I want to speak about what the show is usually about, which is about health. That there are many people who are struggling with their own oppression. Being diagnosed with a serious illness is an ongoing struggle against cells that have gone awry, and we have to engage. We have to converse. We can never ever stop trying to invent and improve the system to sustain, save their lives. So I do want to remind people of our core mission is to sustain and save lives. Specific to this, we're still in the thick of it. And I'm not talking about the politics or the military action. I'm talking about how we feel about it. We're really in the midst of this swirl, and we're confused. Please understand, everyone who's listening, that from the moment of confusion will come clarity. And that from that clarity, we can never lose sight of what we're trying to seek as a people, peace. The world will never be complete and whole until we have peace. And even though there's evil in the world, let us not become evil in the face of evil. I understand response is essential, but for the purpose of bringing us to a better place. And so that's my prayer for all of us, and that's my hope, that from this moment of great darkness will come light.
Well, thank you, Gil, for just sharing today on this timely, topic. And I know you'll be leaving soon, and I hope you are able to see your daughter, spend some time with her. And I just thank you that you were able to just spend some time today on Planetary Health First, Mars Next, and talk about what really is of immediate need. So
thank you, my friend. I'm looking forward to returning to the show at another time and diving into bigger issues about health and obviously planetary health. Take care, everybody.
Friends, it has been a great journey today on Planetary Health First, Mars Next. Follow us for more on Planetary Health First, Mars Next. Until next time, peace be with you.